And maybe one of the biggest things it built in me was perspective. Once you have lived through some deep pain, you stop judging people so quickly by what they look like on the outside. You begin understanding that people can still be smiling and still struggling, that they could be high functioning, but they still hurting. They could still be achieving and still grieving, still strong and still tired. And maybe somebody listening needs to hear this today. What you are carrying may be painful, but it may also be forming something in you that you cannot fully see yet. Wisdom, compassion, faith, clarity, self-awareness, strength. People love the word resilient. I don't know why. They just love that word, resilient. They love calling somebody strong. They love looking at what you've survived in and say, wow, I don't know how you made it through that. They love the comeback story. And they love the version of you that's still standing after everything else fell apart. And, it's good. They love the testimony after the storm. But what people do not talk about enough is what it costs to become that person. They do not talk enough about the tears that the person had to go through, or the mental exhaustion, the loneliness, or the way that a long fight can wear on your body, your mind, your faith, your relationships, and even your sense of worth. They do not talk enough about the fact that resilience does not always feel powerful while you're living through it. Sometimes it just feels like survival. Sometimes it feels like waking up exhausted and still having to function anyway. Sometimes resilience can look like you still have to parent anyway. You still have to work, or you still have to show up when your heart is tired and your mind is tired, your spirit is tired, like everything is tired. But you keep showing up. And that is what I want to talk about today.
Step in, tune in, it's your moment, it's your time. We've been bruised, we've been tested, still we rise, still we climb. This is the bold and unbreakable experience, where your heart gets louder than your fear again. Stand tall, shine strong, let your spirit in. The bold and unbreakable, let the journey begin.
Welcome to the Bold and Unbreakable Experience. I'm your host, Dr. Ella F. Warren, or Quiz. I am a transformational life coach, a consultant, a speaker, author, and founder/CEO of Bravely Overcoming Life's Difficulties, or BOLD. And this is a space for real stories, real struggles, real faith, real lessons, and real overcoming. This podcast is really about how we live through life's difficulties without letting those difficulties have the final say. In the last episode, I shared why I started this podcast. I opened up about who I am, some of what I've lived through, and while creating this space felt so important to me. But today, I want to go a little deeper. Today, I want to talk about what the fight built in me. Not just what happened, but what a long, exhausting fight can do to your mind, your faith, your emotions, your identity, and your sense of self. Because there's always the thing that happened, right? And then there's the who you become while you're trying to survive it. So today, this episode is for the person who has been in a long fight. The kind of fight that stretches across months, years, the fight that stretches disappointments and setbacks or prayers and exhaustion. Because we get tired. The kind of fight that changes you slowly over time. And if that is where you have been, then I want to put words to that today. I want to talk honestly about the emotional, spiritual, and mental toll of prolonged struggle, but also about what can still be shaped, strengthened, and formed in you while you're living through it. So let me take you back a little bit to the part of my life where resilience stopped being a nice word to say and it became something I had to live through every day. A season that kept stretching longer than I expected, demanding more from me emotionally, mentally, and spiritually than I ever prepared to carry. One of the things I remember so clearly is how early motherhood and marriage were already teaching me what it felt like to carry too much without enough support. After I had Stephanie, I should have been in a season of, I should have been in a season of healing and recovery. I should have been in a season of adjusting to life with a newborn, learning a new rhythm as a family. I should have been in a season of just simply trying to rest. And while there were moments early on when Steph's dad or my ex husband helped with everything, over time, more and more of the daily weight started to fall on me. I remember my ex husband handing me a ledger with every bill he had paid while I was on maternity leave. He handed me a ledger with all the bills. So it was all written out. I remember like it was yesterday, it was written out line by line. And I was expected to pay him back once my tax refund came. And I remember how that felt. Standing there as a wife who had just given birth, exhausted and caring for a newborn, yet feeling less supported and more accounted for. I was already carrying the physical exhaustion of childbirth, the emotional demands of motherhood, and the pressure of keeping life moving. And it became clear that the burden was not being carried equally. That was one of the early cracks. And the thing about early cracks is that they do not always look dramatic. Sometimes they look quiet, like a swallowed hurt or a woman just trying to keep functioning because there's still a baby crying and responsibilities waiting. Then came another pregnancy with my son Stephen. Then it came more pressure and more emotional exhaustion. I remember one night after a cookout when I was pregnant with Stephen, uh, my ex-husband, he came home drunk and somehow he was angry. And I remember him punching a hole in the wall. It was something about that moment that just awakened some of the old fears in me because remember in the last episode, I told you I had survived abuse before. So my body remembered what that felt like. So in that instance, I decided that I was going to move upstairs in my own home, trying to create some distance between he and I, but we were still living under the same roof. And sometimes the fight starts building something in you before you even realize you're in a fight. And looking back now, I realized that the fight was already shaping me long before I understood just how long that fight would become. And just when life already felt overwhelming, it became even heavier. Sometimes pain comes in layers. And Germany was one of those seasons where the layers just started stacking quickly. So when we moved there, part of me I still hoped that a new place could become a fresh start, even with the strain already in the marriage. I wanted to believe that things could get better, but Germany did not heal what was already breaking. So, not long after we arrived in Germany, I remember just like it was yesterday, we was at the hotel room because that's what happens when you PCS to a different, another area, another location or country, whatnot. We're in a hotel room. Not long after we got there, my son, he was 11 months old, collapsed into a grand mal seizure in our hotel room. It was in that moment, none of my clinical knowledge as a nurse mattered. I was not thinking like a medical professional. I was thinking like a mother. I was watching my son convulse, and it terrified me. And it terrified me to know that I couldn't control what was happening. So later on down the line, my son was diagnosed with epilepsy. And just like that, another layer was added to an already exhausting life. And then months later, I get sick. I got sick. I was hospitalized. And I had to get a tonsillectomy. I had to get tonsillectomy surgery. I got an infection from that. I recovered, But instead of feeling supported, I felt pressure about money, pressure to recover quickly, pressure to get back to work, pressure to just keep surviving. And there's something deeply lonely about being sick in a foreign place and realizing that the emotional support you need is not really there. I remember how depleted and embarrassed I felt during those years. At one point, I was drinking Slim Fast for lunch because I didn't have enough money for food. He did, I didn't. So the struggle was touching everything. Ooh, ooh. It was touching my body, my peace, my finances, my confidence. And if you've ever lived through a season where life just kept piling on while you still had to keep functioning, please know this. That kind of endurance is not weakness, that is resilience, even when it does not feel strong while you're still living in it. So, Germany taught me something else too. It taught me that some pain is not just about difficult circumstances. Some pain comes from living in environments where your voice keeps getting smaller, your choices keep getting narrower, and your spirit slowly starts learning what control feels like before you even had the words to really describe it. One of the deepest wounds during that season involved my daughter, Nicole. She could not get medically cleared to move to Germany. And leaving her behind with my mother in North Carolina, it truly broke my heart. I kept telling myself that it would only be temporary, that we would eventually figure things out, which we were supposed to. She was supposed to eventually get cleared later. But the longer we stayed overseas, the more powerless I felt. Ultimately, Nicole didn't get cleared, even though they said she would. So I began begging my ex husband for compromises and begging him for understanding. I begged him for a way to reconnect our family. But what I kept running into was that emotional dismissal, the control, and the indifference, while I quietly unraveled inside. But by then, I had already started thinking seriously about leaving. I needed to get back home. I needed to be back where with my family. I was looking at some of the apartments in back in Fayetteville and in North Carolina and Virginia. And I was trying to figure out how to rebuild my life and reconnect with my daughter. And then one day, he asked for the children's passports, saying that he needed them for a trip. I handed him over without realizing that that moment would become one of the darkest turning points of my life. When he got the passports, he locked them away and he refused to return them. And suddenly, what had felt like emotional strain became something much deeper: manipulation, control, and the realization that I was being cornered into an impossible choice: stay in a situation that was breaking me or leave knowing that I could be separated from my children. No mother should ever have to carry that decision. But even in that painful season, the fight was building something in me: discernment. Forced me to start seeing things more clearly. It taught me how long prolonged pressure can make people question themselves, doubt their instincts, and slowly lose sight of who they are. One of the greatest mercies in that season was that somewhere underneath all of the exhaustion and the heartbreak and the pressure, I was still there. Yeah, I was wounded and I was tired, yeah, but I was still there. If you want to read more about my story, I share much more of my journey in my Amazon's best-selling book, Not Without My Children. I'll place the information in the show notes below. I think that's where some people need more than just the inspiration. When you have lived under pressure for a long time, sometimes a motivational message is just not enough. It's just not enough. Sometimes you need some real support. I mean, we're all human and we all have difficult situations. And you need community. You need a safe place to process what the fight has done in you mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and also who you're trying to become on the other side of all of this. So if you're listening to this and thinking, I need more than just a podcast episode, I need support, I want you to know that that's exactly why I created my group coaching space. It is for people who are tired of just surviving and are ready to do the deeper work of healing rebuilding, growing, and moving forward with support, structure, accountability, and community. So if that sounds like where you are right now, take a look at this video.
Have you been feeling overwhelmed, stretched thin, or unsure about what comes next? The Bold Reset is a bi-weekly 6-week transformational coaching experience designed to help you reset and move forward. Together, we'll focus on mental well-being, stress tolerance, character strength, mindset, and future focus with goal setting. Beginning June 10th, 2026, you can join us in a group setting or choose one-to-one coaching for more personalized support. Spaces are limited, so don't wait. Or register now at boldandempowered.com and take your next bold step today.
Let me get back into the story, because if Germany wore me down, the courtroom and everything that followed cut even deeper. That was the season where resilience stopped being something theoretical. It became something I had to live breath by breath. I can remember the courtroom, like I can remember it like I was still there, and I remember hearing accusations and lies about me, and I felt completely unprotected. Now I'm there with him. I had nobody. It was just me. And I remember the confusion and the powerlessness and the devastation of that custody ruling, the feeling that the ground had fallen from underneath me. People hear words like custody battle and think it's a legal issue. But when you live through it, it's so deep, like life altering. When my children were taken from me, something inside of me shattered. And what followed only deepened that pain. The humiliation and the fear, the threats, the monitored visits, the missed documents or the missed moments, the child support issues, the divorce, and the constant pressure of just trying to stay connected to my children while also trying to rebuild my life. And part of what made that season so painful was the judgment that came with it. There's a common misconception that if a mother loses custody of her children, especially as the primary caregiver, she must have done something terrible. People automatically assume neglect or abuse or failure. They assume that there has to be some major flaw in her character for that to happen. That wasn't my reality. I was a good mother. I loved my children deeply. I cared for them daily. I sacrificed for them and built my life around them. They were my world. And that is why it hurt so deeply to suddenly be painted as something I wasn't. To watch people form opinions about me, some who barely knew me and some who didn't even know me, based on accusations and narratives that did not reflect the truth of who I was as a mother. Now, that kind of experience, it does something to you emotionally. Because now you're not only grieving separation from your children, you're also grieving the way that your identity has been distorted in the eyes of other people. And when you are already fighting to hold yourself together, carrying that kind of judgment on top of heartbreak can feel unbearable. That kind of heartbreak, it follows you everywhere. It sits with you when you wake up, it sits with you when you drive, when you work, and when you try to sleep. I still remember one day when they came to visit me and we went to the airport. There was this one tear in Stephen's eye, that one tear rolling down his face when it was time for him to leave. That moment broke something in me in a way I still can't fully explain. After a while, I realized that I was not just fighting a court battle anymore. I was fighting not to disappear into my own pain. There were seasons I was functioning on the outside while barely holding it together in the inside. But even in that, something was being built in me. Capacity. The ability to survive what I thought might destroy me without completely losing myself in the process. Because prolonged pain has a way of revealing both how human you are and how much strength your soul can carry under pressure. That's actually why I need to pause right there. I need to pause because this is where people often they misunderstand resilience. They see the movement, but they do not always see the weight behind the movement. They see the fact that you keep going, but they do not always understand what it took for you to get up and keep moving. So that's what resilience to me is like. And I think that sometimes people assume that resilience means that you were never shaken. That's not true. Resilience does not mean that you weren't unaffected. It means you kept going anyway. It means crying and still praying and hurting and still showing up, being disappointed and still believing that your life can hold purpose. Resilience is not pretending that you're okay. It is refusing to let pain have the final word. And for me, resilience was not always graceful. Sometimes it looked like making it through the day and not even knowing how I did it. Sometimes it looked like functioning while emotionally exhausted and taking care of somebody else and then sitting alone with my own thoughts when the day got quiet. Sometimes it looked like praying the same prayer over and over again because I didn't know any new words. I didn't even have any new words. I was tired in my body, tired in my mind, my heart. I was tired. I was definitely tired in my spirit. And when a fight lasts a long time, it changes the way that you experience yourself. Prolonged pressure can make you question your worth and your judgment, your emotions, even your ability to rest. It can make you live in survival mode so long that peace starts feeling unfamiliar. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted this podcast to exist. Because some people need language for what prolonged pain actually does to a person. The emotional toll matters. The mental toll, it matters. The spiritual tolls, it matters. Becoming weary does not mean that you're weak. It means that you're human, right? Sometimes resilience is ugly before it ever becomes inspiring. Sometimes it looks like crying in the car before walking into work. Have you ever been there? Sometimes it looks like saying, God, I do not understand this, but please help me get through today. Sometimes it looks like surviving 1 hour, one prayer, one responsibility, one breath at a time. And there were seasons where resilience also mean accepting help, learning that strength is not always carrying everything alone, but allowing safe people to stand beside you when the weight becomes too heavy. So yes, resilience kept me going, but not because I felt strong every day. It kept me going because somewhere underneath all of the pain, there was still a part of me, and I truly believe a part of God sustaining me, that refused to let the pain be the end of my story. And that's why these conversations matter beyond this podcast. Because sometimes a message like this needs to reach a room, not just a pair of earbuds. Sometimes whole communities need words for what pressure, pain, and endurance can reveal. So if you're listening and you're thinking, this is the kind of message people in my church, my organization, or my women's event that I have coming up, or a conference that I'm planning, or the community needs to hear, I want you to know that I would be honored to bring this message into those spaces as well. Speaking about resilience, healing, faith, identity, pressure, and overcoming is deeply personal to me because I know what one honest message can do for somebody who's trying to keep going. So if that is something that you're looking for, take a look at this short video and I'll meet you right back here.
When you need a speaker who can inspire, connect, and leave people transformed, Dr. Ella F. Warren delivers. Some speakers give information, others leave people changed. Dr. Ella F. Warren speaks from lived experience, strength, faith, and transformation. empowering audiences to overcome adversity, reset their mindset, and move forward with courage and purpose. She empowers audiences to turn adversity into strength, pain into progress, and life's hardest moments into bold, meaningful next steps. With powerful messages on Own Your Overcome, You Are Not Your Reaction, and resilient leadership, she moves hearts and challenges people to rise. Visit boldandempowered.com or email info@boldandempowered.com to book Dr. Warren for your next event.
So as I come back out of that, I want to return to the heart of this episode. Not about what just prolonged struggle cost me, but what it built in me. Because if I stopped the story at the pain, all you will hear is loss. And the loss was real, but pain was not the only thing being formed in those years. And when I look back now, I can see that the fight built determination in me. Not motivation, determination. Motivation comes and goes depending on how you feel, but determination stays when the feelings leave. It stays when the season is still hard, when the prayers still feel unanswered, and when life still feels heavy. Determination says, I am still getting up, I'm still trying, and I'm still here. And honestly, that is what carried me. Not constant strength or positivity, but determination. That fight also exposed some things in me. It revealed how much of my identity had been tied to being strong and responsible and needed. It taught me that I could be high functioning and still hurting at the same time. I kept going to school, I kept working, kept earning promotions, and kept building a future, even while carrying grief underneath it all. And those accomplishments were never about trying to look impressive. They were reminders to myself that pain was not the only thing happening in my life. The fight was real, but it did not get the final word over my mind, my discipline, my purpose, or my future. Spiritually, though, that is where the deepest work was happening. My faith became more honest, more stripped down, and more real. I had to learn how to pray when I was exhausted, how to trust God without understanding Him, and how to sit with grief while still holding on to faith. Before that season, my faith mostly had words, but during that season, my faith had weight. It became the thing holding me together when I felt like I was falling apart. Looking back now, I can see that God was sustaining me long before I had words for what He was doing. The fight also taught me about identity under pressure. Prolonged struggle will try to rename you. It will try to convince you that you are only exhausted or broken, forgotten, or stuck. But somewhere in the middle of all that pain, God kept reminding me that I was still more than what I was surviving. I was still intelligent, still capable, still called, still becoming. And maybe one of the greatest things that season built in me was the ability to see people different. Because once you have survived something so deep and you stop judging other people so quickly, you understand that people can still be smiling and still struggling, achieving and still grieving, functioning and still hurting. Now, I need to bring this a little bit closer to the listener because I do not want this episode to stay only in my story. I want it to give the words direction and encouragement to people who are still in the middle of their own long fight and who are trying to figure out how to endure it without losing themselves. Now, if that's you, the first thing I want you to do, hear me, the first thing I want you to do is stop minimizing the toll. If you are tired, say you're tired. If you're discouraged, be honest about that too. And if your faith feels stretched, acknowledge it. You cannot heal what you keep downplaying. One of the biggest mistakes people make in prolonged struggles is downplaying how deeply it has impacted them emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. That only delays the healing. Second, stop measuring your strength only by how well you perform. Strength is not productivity. Sometimes strength looks like honesty. Sometimes it looks like rest. And sometimes it looks like asking for help or admitting this has affected me deeply. If all you know how to do is perform strength, eventually you lose connection with your real needs. Third, create support on purpose. Long fights isolate people. They convince you that you have to carry everything by yourself. You need safe people. You need healthy spaces. You need rhythms that support your healing. Healthy community matters. Wise counsel matters. And therapy, coaching, accountability, prayer circles, and support systems matter. Support is not weaknesses, it is wisdom. Fourth, pay attention to your identity under pressure. Long struggles can make people guarded, numb, hyper independent, or so used to surviving that they forget who they are outside the fight. Ask yourself honestly, who have I become in this season? Awareness is not condemnation. Awareness is where healing begins. And finally, honor quiet progress. Long fights make people overlook small victories, but they matter. Getting out of bed when your heart feels heavy matters. Praying through tears matters. Making one healthy choice in a difficult week matters. Continuing without becoming bitter, cruel, or completely shutting down, all of that matters. Sometimes progress isn't, it's not dramatic. Sometimes progress is simply not giving up. Protect your mind. Stay rooted in something deeper than quick results. And remember that endurance is not just about lasting. It is about how you last. It's about learning how to stay connected to truth, faith, and purpose, and even hope when life feels heavy. Because when you learn how to endure with honesty, support, wisdom, and faith, you slowly move from survival toward healing from pain toward purpose. One more thing, keep some record of what God is doing. Journal, write prayers, write lessons, write down what you are learning because long fights have a way of blurring together. Sometimes you need your own reminders that God has already carried you through things you once thought would break you. So, quick plug, if you're looking for a place to reflect, process your thoughts, or write your prayers or document your healing journey, check out Unwritten Pages. It's available on Amazon now. I'll make sure to place that information in the show notes below. All right, so all of that brings me back to something I still, well, something that I started introducing earlier in the series, Unwritten Pages, because resilience and endurance were never just about surviving pain. They were also about refusing to believe the story ended there. There were definitely seasons where I could not see what the next chapter of my life was going to look like. Seasons where the future felt blurry and uncertain. But resilience is what helps you turn the page anyway. It says, I do not know exactly what comes next, but I'm not done yet. And honestly, that may be one of the greatest things the fight built in me. The refusal to believe my worst chapter would be my only chapter. I hate that some lessons came through pain. I wish some chapters had unfolded differently, but I cannot deny that something was formed in me through all of it. Built grit, compassion. It built a deeper prayer life. It built a greater ability to sit with people in their pain without rushing them through it. It gave me a more honest understanding of what it means to survive something that follows you everywhere. And maybe one of the biggest things it built in me was perspective. Once you have lived through some deep pain, you stop judging people so quickly by what they look like on the outside. You begin understanding that people can still be smiling and still struggling, that they could be high functioning, but they still hurting. They could still be achieving and still grieving, still strong and still tired. And maybe somebody listening needs to hear this today. What you are carrying may be painful, but it may also be forming something in you that you cannot fully see yet. Wisdom, compassion, faith, clarity, self-awareness, strength. Sometimes pain and growth are happening at the same time. This chapter can be hard, and the story can still be moving forward. That is what unwritten pages means to me. God was still writing, even while I was still hurting. So if you're listening today and life has been wearing you down, I want you to think about something. What has your struggle built in you? Not just what it has taken from you, because that matters too, but what has it formed in you while you were trying to survive it? Sometimes we become so focused on the pain, and understandably so, that we never stop to notice the strength, wisdom, compassion, faith, or endurance that was also developing underneath. And that is why unwritten pages mean so much to me. Long fights can make you feel like the chapter will never end. Like, God, can you just hurry this thing along? Long chapters can make you feel like the exhaustion is permanent. And it can make you wonder if this is just the way that life is going to be. But resilience is what keeps you turning the page anyway. It is what keeps whispering, there has to be more than this, even before you can actually see it. Not because you have all the answers, because something inside you refuses to believe that God has brought you this far just to leave you here forever. The fight has also taught me to respect the process. Process is slow and repetitive, and sometimes it's uncomfortable. And it rarely feels dramatic while you're living through it. But so much of the real transformation happens there. That is where faith deepens, perspective shifts, identity, it matures, and healing quietly begins. The fight forced me into process, and process taught me things one breakthrough moment never could. So if you're in a painful chapter right now, do not count yourself out. Even here in the exhaustion and the grief or the uncertainty, that something may still be forming in you. You may not fully see it yet, but that does not mean that it's not happening. Today, this episode was about the real version of resilience. Not the polished version, but the lived version. And in this next episode, I want to take you a step further and talk about fear. Because sometimes the biggest battle is not only what happened to you, sometimes the biggest battle is what fear is trying to convince you about your future. That is where the story begins to shift. Because resilience, it kept me going, but resilience alone was not transformation. At some point, I had to decide that I was not just going to survive my life, I was going to move forward. Thank you so much for sitting with me in this episode of the Bold and Unbreakable Experience. And remember this, just because this chapter is hard, it does not mean that your story is over. There are still unwritten pages ahead. So if this episode spoke to you in any way, I hope you'll share it with someone who may need encouragement or perspective, or simply the reminder that they are not in this by themselves. Be sure to like and subscribe and to follow along for more meaningful and more real conversations. Because every difficult lesson and every breakthrough is another opportunity for you to own your own overcome. So until next time, Bodhi, stay curious, stay bold, and stay unbreakable.
You made it here. You showed up strong. Every scar you carry belongs in this song. You're bold, unbreakable. Say it out loud, unshakable. I am bold, I am unbreakable. Yeah, built from every fall, every no. I turn to go. I am bold, I am unbreakable. When the world says stop, I say watch me go. Till the next time, keep your crown, keep your flame high. You are bold.